Hi, this is Drew Tignanelli. This is our March 2024 update here with Michael P. How are you, Mickey?
I'm doing good. I'm still getting used to writing that 24 at the end of the date line on the checks.
Yeah, look at you. You got a vest and a big bulky shirt on, and
Still cold.
it's still cold. Supposed to get up to like almost 70 today when we're recording this.
Here
Here,
in Oh yeah, well,
60 at where you are, right?
it's not
Well,
terrible right now. I wear a vest most of the year.
yeah,
Kind
it's
of my
true.
signature look.
Yeah, like that's your best look. Anyway, home prices are still rising.
Home prices are still rising. Nationally, over the past year, we saw 5.5% rise in home prices. Even and towards the end of last year, we saw mortgage rates fall from a historical high of 7.79 down to about 6.6. But as of this year, they've started to go right back up again.
Yeah, well, I mean, supply was short, and now with all the people that refinance at low rates, they don't want to sell. So supply is even shorter than
Yep.
it's ever been. So, um, we need some kind of strategy to be able to build more housing in a constructive way, but
Right.
nobody seems to be willing to do that. They all want to bring the drawbridges up. Not in my neighborhood. Do it over there.
Yeah. Well, as you've said before, the Fed is the major driver of massive change in the economy. And to date, the Fed is still holding firm that they don't want to change rates up or down, even though a lot of pundits are still predicting that they'll drop a quarter of a point at least 3 times before the end of the year. But no sign in sight of that so far.
Yeah, well, I'm I'm convinced that they have no clue what they're doing. But that's just me, they've proven that too many times in my 40-year career. They have no clue what they're doing.
Well, the next time for you to get some more information on whether or not they have a clue is going to be during this month, March 19th and 20th, is when they're going to hold their meeting. So that's when all of us financial advisors and bankers and everybody else in the finance industry is going to sit there around 1, 2 o'clock and watch our Yahoo Finance to find out what they announced.
Yeah, well, it was a barely seemed like a given they were going to cut by 0.25%, but now they don't seem like they're going to cut.
No, we had
Usually
a
in a
little bit of pop
presidential
in inflation.
Right. Usually in a presidential election year, they will lower rates. Now, there are people out there that say, no, look, over history, they've raised rates during election years quite often. But normally when you see that, it's when they're just starting to raise rates is in a presidential election year. But when you start to raise rates, Mike, it doesn't have an impact on the economy for 6 months to
Takes
a
a little
year.
while. Yeah.
So the election will be far gone by the time the impact of the Fed. Jeremy has been raising rates since 2022, and he's got an inverted yield curve that he's had for almost 2 years. That's insane because an inverted yield curve will sooner or later cause the economy to have a serious problem like you're talking about with this topic you want to address, which is the commercial office space debt.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the biggest concerns out there in the market, one of the favorite topics for articles out there in the finance market is the fact that so many of these commercial office buildings that now have much lower occupancy, since many companies are allowing work from home. You haven't seen the big effect of that exodus yet because A, leases are locked in, and then B, the financing tied to these buildings is generally 5-year financing or more, generally 5 to 7, I believe. So in the next 2 years is when we expect to begin to see these refinances, and these office buildings are going to have to refinance their debt at significantly higher interest rates than they had before.
If they're able to refinance at all.
Right,
That's
because
another.
part of financing your debt is not based, the value of the building is also based on the occupancy rate and the lease rate.
Yeah. So it is a problem, and it's mainly for smaller banks and regional banks. They were the predominant lenders to commercial office space. But we've seen the same with retail in the past, when Amazon became the powerhouse that they became, retail space had a big drying up to some degree.
This morning, as we're shooting this video, Macy's announced they're closing 150 stores.
Yeah, well, but you've noticed that the retail shopping centers have adjusted to figure out how to live in an Amazon world.
More restaurants.
More restaurants. And the office building people will sooner or later figure out how to live in a world of remote work,
Yeah,
and you know what? I think people are finding that remote work is great, but it's great as a partial thing. I think that's the way that most workers are appreciating remote work is a partial type of situation. A couple days in the office, couple days at home,
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on to some of the planning topics, one of the things to acknowledge is that markets have done a lot of recovery. Markets have been up recently. The month of February, we're shooting this in the last couple of days, but it looks like February will have been a good month for the markets. This is always a great time when markets are higher than they've been to say, hey, is my risk tolerance still the same? Has anything changed going forward with how much I want exposed to the stock market versus not? And then the even easier one to consider is, do I have any significant purchases coming up or significant requirements where I'm going to have to get cash to pay for something? And sometimes when markets are high like this, it's a good time to take that known money that you need off the table, put it into the treasury fund so that you can insulate it from any market movements.
Yeah. Now, when you say risk tolerance, what you're basically, let me put it down into a very simple way to understand that, is if you worried like all get out during 2022, when the markets were going down, you should be talking to your advisor and saying, I didn't like 2022 at all. Is there a way that I can adjust my portfolio that maybe it'll dampen my volatility to some degree?
Well, yes, I will say that in this unique situation, we have to acknowledge that in 2022, we had a horrible bond market and a horrible stock market.
Yes, but that's the point, is that the bond market is now much healthier than it's been in the past. And so that you can use bonds today much easier to dampen volatility if that's what you desire.
Right.
So with our planning topic, we wanted to get into what I always say, Mike, is the greatest risk to your personal finance. And I would have never said this 5-10 years ago, but cybersecurity, with the stories I'm reading and seeing and hearing, I mean,
Yep.
you have to be overtly vigilant now, because they're not just scamming you out of $5,000 or $10,000. They're getting into your accounts and trying to wipe them out totally.
Yeah. I mean, I frequently get emails where I look at it very, very closely and I go, you know what? This might be legitimate, but I'm just going to delete it and let them contact me a different way.
Yeah. And it's extremely important to understand the techniques that they use. It's predominantly over the computer or your iPhone or your iPad or whatever. It's predominantly starts with either an email or you're searching the web for something.
Or a notification because you've already clicked on something.
A text that came in on your telephone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you click on that text, that link in that text, when you click on that thing in that website, when you click on that link in the email or open up that attachment of the email, that's when the game begins.
Yeah. So the first biggest tip is to always be suspicious with any kind of communication you get that you didn't solicit or expect. Don't jump to thinking like, oh, well, this Bank of America, I have Bank of America, so I expect this. Well, wait a minute. A lot of people have Bank of America. So you've got to always stay suspicious. And then especially be cautious of your sensitive information. One of the things that we've heard a lot recently is a scenario where somebody impersonates Schwab or a bank, and eventually they get you on the phone call and they say, well, we need to verify you before we can help you with this. Give us your username and your password. I will tell you that it is possible for an institution to ask you for your username as one of the points of verification. They will never, ever, ever ever ask you for your password. They don't even have it. That's part of their security program, is that those passwords are an encrypted database that they can't even retrieve it. The only thing they can do is reset it when you can't remember it anymore.
Yeah, our urgency, we've got to do this. Patriotism, you're gonna help us find the bad guys, Mike. That's a common one now. We
Yep.
we need to find the bad guys, and you're gonna help us, and we really need your help. We hope that you'll participate.
Some other things to keep in mind is to really consider what information you put on social media. Is it really a safe idea to let everyone know your date of birth? Is it a great idea to call attention to your mother's maiden name? Should you necessarily have your email account associated, displayed on your social media or anything of that nature? So that's something to be very cautious of. And one of the big things is, if you are doing online transactions, and really almost any transaction you can, it's always better to use a credit card than a debit card. Debit card money, when it's gone, it's a little harder to get it back. Credit card money, if you recognize it quickly, it tends to be very easy to get it back.
Yeah, and you're using somebody else's money when you're using a credit card. You're not using your own money.
Right, exactly. So, one of the other common things right now is really small frauds, things that they don't think you'll catch. So it's really important that every month you go through the transactions, both in your credit card and your checking account, and you make sure that you really know those charges.
Well, people are now it's not cyber, it's the old type of scam where they get your check and then they reduplicate your check and they start writing checks on it and start cashing them all around town. That's a big one now.
Yeah, or just take your routing number and your check number and put it in as an online payment for something that they
Yeah.
think they can't get traced on. So, what's one of the things you've told people to do since the times when you had to do it by mail?
I've been telling people since 2006, every single person listening to this video needs to freeze their credit report. What does that mean? It means that Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion cannot give out your credit scores or your credit information to anyone to approve a loan unless you thaw your credit report. And it's the number one wall of defense you can put around yourself, and it's free now. It's a very simple process, and all you have to do is have a username and password, and you can freeze your credit report and only open it when you want to use it yourself. Nobody else can get through it. That will eliminate, Mike, people borrowing money in your name. It'll eliminate people setting up accounts in your name. You say, well, why would somebody set up an account in my name? It's an elaborate scam that they use.
They already ruined their own credit.
Well, they try to, what they do is they set up an account and they start funding it and they get the bankers to believe they are you. And then after they do that for a while, then they go in and say, hey, I need $100,000 loan. Can you lend it to me? Yeah, let's get your credit information.
So speaking of passwords, something that I know family members of mine have done in the past is use the exact same password for everything. So now all you have to have is one site leak your information, and now they have your email and your password, and they have computer software that will just go attempting to log in across the web in high value websites. So every place you go should have a different password. And then wherever you can, you should enable two-factor authentication as an additional layer of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Two-factor authentication is extremely important. You should monitor your credit reports. You should you're allowed to pull them down for free every year, one from each one, every year free. You should do that. And we didn't get into it, but if you don't check your bank statement, Mike, and somebody fraudulently takes money from your account, and you go to the bank 3 months later and say, hey, I just noticed that I lost all the, where did this go? And it was fraudulent. The bank may not reimburse you.
Yeah, every bank is a little different. The most common one I hear for banks is 3 months. Credit cards are also, if you wait more than 3 months in some cases, or in other cases, 6 months. Some credit card companies are even more generous with the time, like American Express, I think, gives you almost a year to report frauds. But yeah, you got to watch those statements. You got to be paying attention. You know, some of the frauds that have been going around are free USB sticks. If you're ever somewhere and they're giving out free USB sticks, no, thank you. That's okay. You can
Most people don't know what a free USB stick is, Mike. That seems like a simple thing to you, but it's
Well, I
that
think
little
our
thing that
demographic does.
it's that little thing you plug into your computer there, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't ever want to take one of them and plug it into your computer.
And then one of the biggest things is when you're buying gas, never, ever, ever use a debit card to pay for gasoline. And
Oh, yeah.
the reason is there's this device called a skimmer that people go around. It's really big in the Baltimore area. People go around, they stick this device on top of the credit card slot, and when you run your credit card in and out, it picks up that credit card data and then uses it for other purchases.
Yeah. Amazing. And then you know, your virus and software updated. And you know what, Mike, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to clients who like are trying to be frugal and they don't want to buy a new computer and they're still running Windows 6 or something.
Yeah, Microsoft stopped looking for vulnerabilities in that old software a long time ago. So, but plenty of people are still using them. So
I think it's what, Windows 10 and up, they're still supporting. Or did they do away with 10?
I honestly, I wish I'd looked it up, but I don't know which one it is. The point is that
It's
really,
at least 10 that is the best that they're updating. Anything before, a lot of people out there probably still have Windows 8, I bet, and they are definitely not updating that anymore.
yeah, there's the fraudsters are like lions and we're all gazelles. And if you're running, you know, those old computers, you're the slowest gazelle.
Yeah, and 5 years, 5 years is the most time frame you should have a computer for. After that, just get a new one. It's not going to break the bank for you to buy a new computer.
And make sure you safely dispose of your old one with any data that it might have on it.
And get somebody that you can trust to transfer your information from the old
Yeah.
one to the new one.
I don't know offhand, but a lot of the Office Depot type places have services for things like that. So finally, one of the things that is unfortunately true is that our senior citizens, which, you know, senior citizen starts at 60 for the purposes of this conversation. Um, uh, there is a lot of extra fraud that is being targeted at people at older ages. And something that we've noticed time and time again is somehow they pay attention, and when there's a death of a spouse, people are at their most vulnerable, and that's when they're attacked. So
yeah.
It's important to pay attention to your family. There's additional items that you can do at Schwab. We can put a trusted contact on your account where if Schwab thinks that something is fishy, they'll reach out and say, hey, you know, your dad, he just went into a branch and is asking for $75,000 or $100,000. Do you think this is normal?
Right.
So there's ways to protect, but connection with family and communication is really, really important. If something seems fishy or you think you're in trouble, go to someone you trust and tell them about it because you probably aren't in trouble. It's probably just from somebody trying to scam you.
Yeah. When a person gets elderly, Mike, grief can really put them in an extremely vulnerable situation. It can put anybody in a vulnerable situation, but somebody who's in their 80s or 90s and they're dealing with grief, they're extremely vulnerable. And if they then become isolated, they're by themselves in a house alone for most of the day, you know, then somebody starts coming in to maybe do some cleaning or something. And next thing you know, that person is using that opportunity to take advantage. The list goes on, but
Yeah.
any senior who's using a computer, you know, these scammers really look for seniors who have computer programs. And what they do, Mike, is they put things out on the web to get them to click to. And the minute they click to it, they say, oh, that's probably a senior citizen there. And they clicked on this link, so they're probably vulnerable to our scam. Let's see if we can hit them.
So speaking of vulnerable communities, and this is one of the most depressing to me, children are also a target of these fraudsters. And I think it's important conversation to have with your children or your grandchildren, to talk to them about, hey, if something happens with someone online that you don't know, don't worry about it. You come talk to me, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be in trouble. But there's been tragic cases where children are attempted to be extorted online, and sometimes as a result, the loss is much worse than money.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've said many times, and, I know you don't want me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. They should catch these scammers and they should take them to the city square, hang them, and let the birds eat the flesh off their bodies,
Tell me how you really feel. Don't hold back.
But no, really, because this is one of the most disgusting things. And they actually take delight in it. That's the really sad thing, is that they got these rooms of people that they do this with. And when they hit a target and they get, they're like
They're not,
celebrating.
the other people aren't real.
This is like a video game to them. And whoever's on the other line and what life they just destroyed is totally irrelevant to them.
So as we wrap this up, we'll talk about a couple positive things.
Let's talk positive. That was pretty depressing.
Well, the first one isn't quite as good, but it's good that we're talking about it. This month's webinar coming up is going to be on invisible financial losses, so keep an eye out for that. And we've got a new article coming out for ways to reduce your 2023 taxes while you're already in 2024. Time on that one is of the essence, so you make sure that if you're interested, you read that when it comes out.
But we also have an article on that same topic. So we have a webinar that's already taped, and you can watch that. And then there's an article which is similar, that you can just read if you'd rather just read it. So both are available. Great topics. You know what invisible losses is? Because I don't want everybody to think invisible loss. Okay. Invisible loss, Mike, is when you do your tax return with TurboTax, and you don't get us to review it, and there's a mistake on there of $5,000 against you, and you don't fix it, and it just disappears.
You never knew you lost the money.
You never knew it was an invisible loss, and you're going on your way happy as a clam because you don't realize you just lost $5,000.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's an invisible.
Especially with our clients that we're, advising on advanced tax strategies like qualified charitable distributions, we need to make sure that gets entered in correctly on the tax return. Look,
we do hundreds of tax returns ourselves, and we're constantly looking over our own situation to see. We're always looking them over and auditing them over and over again. And we've even had situations where, like 2 years later, we've noticed that this was a mistake, and then not being embarrassed to tell the client, we go back and fix it. It's rare that it happens, but when we see it, we're going to fix it. We're not going to let that invisible loss just disappear. Anyway.
All right. So our final topic that we share on every single one of these monthly videos is, if you're have a large amount of savings at a brick and mortar bank, you could be making 5% or so at Flourish or some of the other high yield savings accounts. We encourage you to do that. And don't forget, if you haven't gotten a copy of the book, to ask your advisor.
Yeah, Financial Physical. And we updated it on Amazon for 2024 numbers. So if you want the current edition, you go to Amazon and get that. We priced it to sell. And Flourish, you have to get an invite from us to join Flourish. So if you're a client of ours, call your advisor and they'll get you a copy of that. So
absolutely.
Is that everything, Mike? Did we get it
all? I think I said one last topic 3 times.
Yeah, well, you're like a good Pentecostal preacher. This is wrapping it up. I'm wrapping it up 16 times. I'm wrapping it up. Anyway, that's Drew Tignanelli saying God bless.